I'm putting my general manager hat on and delivering a Buffalo Bills mock offseason today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Friday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on YouTube, your first watch every day. Today is going to be fun. I am going to deliver my mock offseason. I'm going through the entire thing as if I were Brandon Beane, general manager of the Bills. I'm going to create the cap space necessary. I'm going to give you the players that I would extend, the players that I would re-sign, the players I would sign as outside free agents. I have a mock draft and a 53-man roster to give you when it's all said and done. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let me get a couple of things out of the way first as I establish some important details here before I dive into sharing my mock offseason. First of all, let me completely acknowledge that this is a big brain thing. I allowed myself to have fun and get creative. This is not designed to be predictive. I am not predicting the Bills offseason. I am telling you what I would do if I were Brandon Beane and I had these resources at my disposal to build the Buffalo Bills roster for the 2022 season. I also want to acknowledge that I understand the advantage that I have. When I talk about the free agents that I would sign, I am doing so uncompeted with, right? I'm not dealing with other teams that are trying to sign these players and, all the negotiating tactics. If I want them, I got them. And so, that creates some, that creates a lot of fun because I could basically do whatever I want, but I do understand that the real challenges that Brandon Beane faced are much more difficult than I faced. The last thing that I'll say is that Greg Thompson of Cover One, he signed off on my entire plan. And not that he helped me pick any players or anything like that, but from a money perspective, from a cap perspective, I worked very closely with Greg Thompson to make sure that everything that I was doing was possible from a cap perspective. And Greg has thoroughly reviewed this, and everything that I do fits under the salary cap, and every contract that I'm going to propose here is within a reasonable valuation of that player. And so with that out of the way, let's get into it. First thing I have to do is create salary cap space. And so when I started this process on Wednesday morning, the Bills were $852,000 over the salary cap, including the release of AJ Klein. And now since then, they have released John Feliciano to save $3.5 million. I have the same move made. And so I'm going to give you all of the players that I would cut to create cap space. Again, the starting point is negative $852,000 in cap space. And so let me say one other thing here before I really dive in. Listen to the whole thing. Because when I cut some of these players, it may raise an eyebrow, but when you hear the finished product, you will fully understand why I did what I did. Just like with the real Bills offseason, if the first thing they do is sign Brian Winters, don't freak out because a trade for Stephon Diggs is coming. All right? You have to let the whole thing play out and let all the puzzle pieces come together to see the finished product. So I wouldn't overreact to any one thing that I do. So, all right, we got to create cap space because we don't have any. We're releasing AJ Klein, which is obviously already done. I am also releasing John Feliciano to save $3.5 million in cap space. I'm also releasing Darrell Williams to create $6.3 million in cap space. Cole Beasley, wide receiver, he's cut, and I save $6.1 million. Tyler Medikevich, he's cut. I saved $2.5 million with that release. And Matt Hawk is cut for a savings of $1.2 million. There's one more move to be made here, is that I'm going to do a base restructure with offensive tackle Deion Dawkins to create $5.23 million in cap space for this year. So we started at $852,000 over the cap. After all of those moves that I just listed, the Bills are now at $23.9 million in available cap space. So we cut Williams, Beasley, Feliciano, Medikevich, and Hawk, and we do a base restructure with Deion Dawkins to create $23.9 million in available cap space. Now, I'm not done creating cap space. I am going to extend some football players here that are not up for renewal. These are non-free agents that I'm going to extend. And through these extensions, it's going to create more cap space. First order of business, Stephon Diggs. We are going to sign him to a new 6-year, $112 million deal. And the way we're going to structure this contract is that it will create $8.6 million in cap space for this year. And so his average annual value is the same that Tyreek Hill just received in his contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. And we announce a 6-year, $112 million deal with wide receiver one. And in doing so, we lock up our top receiver. We make sure that he's paid what he's worth. And we also create $8.6 million in cap space. I have 2 more extensions that I am handing out. The next one is to Mitch Morse, and I'm going to give full credit on all of these extensions. I worked through them with Greg, and Greg signed off on all of these, and for most of them, he created the entire deal. So the next player we're going to extend is Mitch Morse. We're signing him to a 2-year, $20 million extension. We're going to convert $4.5 million of his $6.9 million 2022 salary into a signing bonus, which reduces his 2022 cap hit from 11.25 to 8.25 million. We're guaranteeing 2023 at a $10 million salary, which creates $3 million. So overall, we extend Mitch Morse for 2 more seasons, and in doing so, we create $3 more million in cap space. The last extension that we're handing out is to Jordan Poyer, safety. He's getting a 2-year, $25 million extension. We're going to convert $4.6 million out of $5.6 million in 2022 salary into a signing bonus. We're guaranteeing next year at $12.5 million, which will reduce the 2022 cap hit from 10.776 to 7.7 million, creating $3 million in cap space. Now I have $38.5 million in cap space entering free agency. So I gave you the players I cut. We do the base restructure with Deion Dawkins. We extend Diggs, Morse, and Poyer. And all of a sudden, we are entering free agency with $38.5 million to spend. The next thing that we'll get into are players that I'm going to re-sign to the active roster. The first one is Ryan Bates. His tender as a restricted free agent is 1 year, $2.443 million. We're getting that done. We're bringing Ryan Bates back. The only other player that I am going to re-sign is Jake Kumerow. And I promise you that I did this before the Bills announced on Thursday afternoon that they were re-signing Jake Kumerow. So that was part of my plan. We're signing him to a 1-year, $2 million deal to be our, 5th or 6th wide receiver, blocking specialist, and special teamer. That's it. I'm letting everyone else walk. Levi Wallace, Harrison Phillips, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, they're all walking in free agency. The only two players I'm bringing back are Ryan Bates and Jake Kumaro, which should create some excitement here as I'm about to deliver the free agents that I would sign next. But first, let me tell you about Bet Online. It is that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, so we are now sitting with $38.5 million to spend on free agents, and I have a bunch of free agents that I am going to sign. You want to start with the big fish? I got a couple of big fish here. We'll start with the biggest of fish, and that is defensive end Chandler Jones. We're bringing him home. Rochester native, played his college football at Syracuse, went to the Patriots, went to the Cardinals, has been an unbelievable pass rusher in this league. Now he comes to Buffalo on a 2-year, $30 million deal that does include 2 void years so that we can make the money work. So he's going to have a $5 million salary in 2022, a $16 million signing bonus, and his cap hit for 2022 is $9 million. In 2023, his salary is $9 million. His cap hit is $13 million. And then we do have to have $4 million in dead cap in 24 and 25, the years 2024 and 2025, to make this work. But we have to add a pass rusher. We need a veteran. We like what we have in Rousseau. We like the upside of Basham and Epinesa. But I couldn't not do something significant at defensive end. And when I was able to create this much cap space, the first order of business was sign Chandler Jones, and we got it done. So that's first and foremost. Chandler Jones, a Buffalo Bill, locked up for the next 2 seasons. We still got money to play with, folks. We're not done here in free agency. I'll go ahead and give you my next big fish, if you will. And we're going to the offensive side of the football, and we're signing wide receiver Christian Kirk to a 3-year, $35 million contract. Overthecap.com has a valuation on Christian Kirk of $10.4 million. I exceeded that at 3 years, $35 million. And the Bills add themselves a slot receiver that can win vertically, that can be the punt returner as well. That's very key here. And you add another veteran to this receiving core as you say goodbye to Cole Beasley. You get younger in the slot, and you just have a player here that just kind of fits stylistically with what the Bills do on offense. And we know that he's hanging out with Josh Allen. There's going to be some natural rapport and chemistry that's there. Now bring him in here and let him play football with Josh Allen and really bolster this receiving core for the Buffalo Bills. So Christian Kirk, 3 years, $35 million. Welcome to Buffalo. And so far, that's our 2 big ticket guys. Chandler Jones on defense, Christian Kirk on offense. Again, I created $38.5 million to get this done, and we got a couple of big fish. Now, the rest of my free agent signings are not nearly as significant, but I think these are all very useful players that will have roles on the football team. The next guy that I'll mention is quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's coming back to Buffalo to back up Josh Allen, a big need for this team. We're signing him to a 1-year, $5 million deal, and we're going to get him to the playoffs. Ryan Fitzpatrick, throughout his entire career, he's never been to the playoffs. That changes in 2022 with the Buffalo Bills as Josh Allen's backup. Again, 1 year, $5 million. Then I'm going to sign a cornerback here, Sidney Jones from the Seattle Seahawks. I've talked about him quite a bit here a couple of times, whether it was herd mentality, or the defensive free agency preview where, I feel like this guy's arrow is pointing up. He's a young player, 2nd-round pick of the Eagles. Everybody thought he was a 1st-round pick coming out of Washington. Was injured early on in his career. Then he got more and more playing time with the Eagles and then the Jaguars. And then last year with the Seahawks, he really started to put it all together starting in week 4. And when he was a starter, and he's got really good zone coverage ability, he can play man and he tackles. And so I think he comes in at a 2-year, $8 million deal, which is above his valuation according to Over the Cap, which puts him at $3 million per season. We paid him more than that, and he comes in and has a chance to start opposite of Tre'Davious White. The next player that we're signing is Shaq Lawson, defensive end. You guys know him, former Buffalo Bills first-round pick, had a pretty good run with the Bills. Then he went to Miami on that 3-year, $30 million deal. Then he was traded to Houston. Then he was cut and went to the Jets. And so he's kind of bounced around of late. And, he's not a player that has much going for him in terms of commanding a bigger salary. But we're signing Shaq Lawson to add to this defensive end room that now includes Chandler Jones. It includes the 3 young guys, Basham, Rousseau, and Epinesa. And Shaq Lawson, what my vision here for him is to be that F.A. Obata type player for this defense as the 5th defensive end in the rotation. Our next move is at offensive line. We're going to sign interior offensive lineman Austin Blythe to a 2-year, $4.5 million deal. Overthecap.com has a valuation on him of $1.8 million per season. Again, I paid more than that to try to give you a realistic view about as to what I can do with this money. And Austin Blythe is an Aaron Kromer guy that can play center and guard. And so that's a very useful thing to have that versatility as an interior backup. And I think that he's in the running to start potentially at either left or right guard. And so I'll give you the whole plan here, and you'll see that I have a lot of good competition set up for guard. And Austin Blythe coming in as an Aaron Kromer guy absolutely fits what I'm looking for to come in and compete. Another offensive lineman that we're going to sign is another Aaron Kromer guy, and that's Joseph Noteboom from the Los Angeles Rams. We're signing him to a 2-year, $6 million deal. Overthecap.com has his valuation at $1.5 million per season. I far exceeded that at 2 years, $6 million. And he comes in as somebody who's in the running to start at guard, and he also has the flexibility to play tackle. And so depending on Tommy Doyle's development, you have another option here at tackle in addition to being able to play guard. And so 2 offensive line additions here, both Kromer guys from the past that can come in and provide competition at guard and certainly versatility as backup type players if they don't win out on starting jobs. Now we're going to go to the defensive side of the football. I have 2 defensive tackles that I want to sign. The first one is Daquan Jones, 2 years, $9 million. His valuation, according to Overthecap.com, is at $4 million per season. Again, we exceeded that. Daquan Jones is a proven one-technique run stuffer in the NFL. Had a great run with the Tennessee Titans, spent last year in Carolina, and I think for what the Bills are looking for at one technique, that defensive tackle, he absolutely fits the bill in terms of skill set and size and just a veteran presence that knows how to defend the run. The other defensive tackle that I'm going to sign is a backup 3 technique for Ed Oliver, and that is Taven Bryan from the Jacksonville Jaguars, former first-round pick, has had some flashy moments but has not lived up to being a first-round pick. But I think a situation like Buffalo as a backup to Ed Oliver can really give him what he needs to unlock his potential. We're signing him to a 2-year, $5 million deal. His valuation, according to overthecap.com, is $2.5 million. So it absolutely, right in line with the correct valuation. Now I have a couple of running backs that I signed. The first one, Jerick McKinnon, 1 year, $2 million deal. Overthecap.com has a $992,000 valuation on him. And to me, this guy offers a lot in terms of speed, which I think we can all agree the Bills need in the backfield. They need speed to the perimeter, and they need pass catching ability, which Jerick McKinnon absolutely delivers. You saw that firsthand in the divisional playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. He got healthy late in the season, and he mattered for that Chiefs team. And so we're bringing him over to Buffalo to add some more dynamic ability to the backfield. We're going to sign another running back, and this time it's a veteran that can step in and fill in for Tywan Jones and give you more than what Tywan Jones delivers, and that's Brandon Bolden from the New England Patriots. We're signing him to a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. His valuation, according to overthecap.com, is $2.2 million. But Brandon Bolden gives you a lot as a veteran depth player. First of all, short yardage. He's a really good short yardage running back. He can catch the football, and he's a really good special teamer. And so we're saying goodbye to Tywan Jones, but we're replacing him with a player that gives you similar value on special teams, but can also catch the football and help you on short yardage. So I'm really excited about adding him to the mix as the potential RB4. One more signing on offense. It's a tight end. We're getting a veteran back up behind Dawson Knox, and that is Will Dissly from the Seattle Seahawks. We're signing him to a 2-year, $9 million deal. His valuation, according to overthecap.com, is $4.1 million. And I think he's the perfect tight end, too. He's an above-average blocker, and he has baseline receiving skills, and he's had a lot of flashy moments so far in his NFL career. And so he can immediately help you as an inline player and take some of that off of Dawson Knox, who, you know, his best value, Dawson Knox, is in the passing game. And so we're going to get him more involved as a move piece out of the backfield in the slot and give ourselves a real chance to run some two tight end stuff and just more versatility and options at tight end, which the Bills absolutely need. One more free agent signing. It's a punter. We're signing J.K. Scott to a 2-year, $3 million deal. His valuation, according to Over the Cap, is $920,000. So we exceeded that. And we have our answer at punter. Younger guy, big leg, had a good run with the Green Bay Packers, was hurt this past year with Jacksonville, but he's a talented guy that could come in and pair with Tyler Bass to give the Bills what they're looking for at punter and holder. So that's our aggressive move here to sign these free agents. Greg Thompson says that I needed $34 million in cap space to sign all of these players, and I had 38.5 entering free agency. So we do this, we get this done, and we have $4.5 million in cap space remaining entering the draft. Again, my free agent signings: quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, cornerback Sidney Jones, defensive end Shaq Lawson, offensive lineman Austin Blythe, offensive lineman Joseph Noteboom, defensive tackle Daquan Jones, defensive tackle Taven Bryan, running back Jerick McKinnon, running back Brandon Bolden, tight end Will Dissly, wide receiver Christian Kirk, punter J.K. Scott, and defensive end Chandler Jones, all locked up, and we have $4.5 million to spare entering the draft. And as far as draft picks go, and having the money necessary to sign the draft class, last year's entire draft class had a net cap impact for the top 51 of $1.6 million. And so I'm budgeting here $2 million for this draft class. And then in my back pocket, I can release Star Lotulelei and free up another $4 million. So even though this draft class is going to take me from $4.5 million down to $2 million, I can create another $4 million by cutting Star Lotulelei. So here is my mock draft. And I only picked 5 players because I traded up 2 times. So we went with quality over quantity here because I wanted to make sure that I could roster the players that I drafted. And so we traded up 2 different times to get the players I wanted. So here's my mock draft. And again, you kind of have to see this through the lens of what I did in free agency. So the needs are different right now than they are in real life because I've added all these free agent players. And because of what I was able to do in free agency, it gave me the confidence that I needed to be able to move up and down the board to go and get specific players. And that's exactly what we did. So I picked 25. I stood there and made a pick, and we picked offensive lineman Tyler Smith out of Tulsa, one of my favorite players in this draft. He is probably the most aggressive offensive lineman I've ever seen. An absolute mauler, a physical dude that wants to bury people. And he did it against top competition. He played against Oklahoma State. He played against Ohio State. And this guy is as nasty as they come at offensive line. He's young. He just turned 20 years old. He's a converted defensive lineman. He's massive. He's athletic. He was awesome at the combine. He's got a lot of technique work, right? That's the thing about Tyler Smith. From a handwork and a footwork perspective, this guy needs a lot of work. Well, I got one of the best offensive line coaches in the game in Aaron Cromer. And because of what I was able to do in free agency, there's no immediate need to start this player. I have 4 options at guard right now that I feel comfortable with competing in Joe Noteboom, Austin Blythe, Cody Ford, and Ryan Bates. And now you add Tyler Smith to that list, and you feel like you have the makings of a really high-impact starter at guard as he develops with no urgency to have to play him right away. So that's my first-round pick. In the second round, number 57 overall, I didn't have to trade here. I stood pat, and I picked defensive tackle Travis Jones out of UConn. One of my favorite players in the draft, big, physical, can play over the center. He's that perfect one technique type player that you're looking for. Was part of a rough program there at UConn, but he stood out. There was no good players around him at all, and he occupied a lot of blocks, and he still made a lot of plays against the run and the pass. Dominant at the Senior Bowl, had a great combine, and the coaching staff over there raves about him and his leadership and how he came to campus and how he grew as a person and as a leader and really worked on himself and put himself in position to be a day 2 pick. So our first 2 picks, we go to the trenches. We get ourselves really high ceiling players in Tyler Smith from Tulsa and Travis Jones out of UConn to bolster both the offensive and the defensive line. Now, here's where I started to move up. I moved up in the 3rd round twice. So the Bills are scheduled to pick 89th in the 1st round. I traded up to 71. So I gave up 89, 167, and 243 to go up to 71. And our selection, wide receiver Calvin Austin III out of Memphis. He's not a big guy. He's like 5'7", 175 pounds, but this dude is a baller. He's a certified baller. Watch him play. He plays above his weight class. Really dynamic release package. Extremely dynamic route runner. You watch this guy run routes, and it looks like the cornerbacks are chasing a rabbit, trying to stay in phase with him. Super dynamic. Good ball skills for a little guy. Strong hands. Plays tough. Now, he's a smaller guy, right? He's still, between 5'7" and 5'8". So this isn't a guy that's really going to extend his catch radius. But for gadgety type stuff, for quick separation, for yards after catch, for passes down the field, for punt returning, this dude is an explosive playmaker. And so when he was still on the board in the 70s, I said, I can't wait anymore. I'm moving up from 89, and I'm going and getting my guy. So we go Tyler Smith in the 1st round, Travis Jones, defensive tackle, UConn, in the 2nd round. Then we trade up in the 3rd round to go get Calvin Austin, the 3rd out of Memphis, a wide receiver. And then I trade back into day 2. So I traded to 97. The Bills' next pick was at 128. I gave up 128, 183, and 201 to get up to 97, to get back into day 2. And we're selecting Cam Taylor-Britt, a cornerback out of Nebraska. And I've gotten the chance to spend some time with Cam Taylor-Britt, both at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. This dude is awesome. Wired the right way, a lot of energy, has been super kind. His family's awesome. I think the Bills will love him. He's got good size, good athleticism, physical tackler, and I think he can give you the ability to play zone or man coverage. I think he's a sleeper. Like, he's underrated to me. And to get him at 97, trading back into day 2, to give myself another option at cornerback, I loved it. So then the Bills didn't pick again until 228. And so I just waited from 97 to 228. And I was comfortable, because I traded all those picks. I traded away 167, 243, 128, 183, and 201 to move back up. So I was fine with moving away from those picks because I was able to get the players that I did. And I was able to do what I did in free agency. So at 228, I sat there and I picked running back Ty Chandler out of North Carolina. He's a kick returner. He's got speed to the perimeter. He can catch a football. And he's a good contingency plan in case Jerick McKinnon doesn't work out in free agency. He's a guy that has a bit of an injury, history. Does Jerick McKinnon. So I have good insurance here in Ty Chandler, and a guy that I think can develop into a top 2 back for me as part of the rotation. So there's the draft. I traded up. I only made 5 picks, but I thought with free agency and the draft, you kind of mirror those things together. They work off of each other. It put myself in good position to go get some players that I really liked because I was able to get so much done in free agency. This is the time of year where I've normally given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. And these things are delicious. It's not even like you're sticking to a resolution because you'll enjoy eating them, and you got to try the Built Puffs. Built Puffs are one of the best tasting Built Bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And that's because all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they're healthy for you. They have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So many great flavors. They have mint brownie, raspberry, coconut almond, and they're introducing new flavors all the time. And at Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every single time. Got a deal for you. Go to built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So we did a bunch of stuff. We cut some players. We extended some players. We re-signed some players. We signed some free agents. We did a draft. And now it's time to look at what this roster is. So based on everything I did, I now have a 53-man roster projection to give you right now based on all the new players. And I think you'll like what you see. I think you're going to like it. So we'll go by each position. I'll tell you who's on the depth chart and how this 53-man roster shapes up. At quarterback, I have Josh Allen and Ryan Fitzpatrick as the backup. We're keeping 2 quarterbacks. Now, at some point, the Bills will add some camp arms and guys to get through preseason games. But when it comes down to regular season, I think it'll just be 2, Josh Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick in my scenario. At running back, this seems crazy, but I'm keeping 5. We're keeping Devin Singletary, Jerick McKinnon, Brandon Bolden, Ty Chandler, and Zach Moss. And so I know that's a bit of a shift from what the Bills typically do. They usually keep 4 running backs, but I'm keeping 5. And I understand that Zach Moss will probably be inactive, but based on injuries, I had the flexibility with this roster to keep him around at this point. So we're keeping 5 running backs: Singletary, McKinnon, Bolden, Chandler, and Moss. At wide receiver, we're keeping 6 of those: Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Christian Kirk, Calvin Austin, Marquez Stevenson, and Jake Kumerow. So we have our special teams guy there in Jake Kumerow. We have wide receiver 1 in Steph Diggs. Gabriel Davis steps into the wide receiver 2 role. Christian Kirk in the slot. Calvin Austin as your wide receiver 4, interchangeable type guy that can do a lot of different things. A lot of stuff that Isaiah McKenzie did, but also just a lot more dynamic receiving ability there. And then obviously Stevenson and Kumerow as depth players. And I really like that receiver core. At tight end, we're keeping 3, I guess, with Reggie Gilliam, Dawson Knox, Will Dissly as tight end 2, and then Reggie Gilliam as your hybrid tight end fullback special teams guy. On the offensive line, we're keeping 9 of those. We have a projected lineup would be Deion Dawkins, Ryan Bates, Mitch Morse. Then you have a competition between Cody Ford, Joe Noteboom, and Austin Blythe for your right guard. Spencer Brown is your right tackle. And then Tommy Doyle and Tyler Smith, the first-round pick in this scenario, on the bench. And then, of course, whoever doesn't win the guard battle is on the bench. So, I think this is a good offensive line. You have your center is set in Mitch Morse. You have your 2 tackles in Dawkins and Spencer Brown. And then for your guard spots, it's a lot of great competition between Bates, Ford, Joe Noteboom, Austin Blythe, and your first-round pick, Tyler Smith. So you have a lot of good short-term and long-term options to me at guard. I really like how that's shaped up. At defensive end, Chandler Jones, Greg Rousseau, let's go. And then the reserves, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham, and Shaq Lawson. I think that's a great room. Love the addition of Jones there and Shaq Lawson to go with the 3 young players. At defensive tackle, I have 5 of those being kept, keeping in mind I could cut Starlo Talele and obviously create $4 more million in cap space. We have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Starlo Talele, Taven Bryan, and then Travis Jones, our second-round pick. At linebacker, we're keeping 5 of those. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Andre Smith, Tyrell Dotson, and Joe Giles Harris makes the team. At cornerback, we're keeping 7, but it's really 6 because Trey White I have starting the year on the PUP list, and so we get a free roster spot because of that. And our cornerback room is Dane Jackson, Sidney Jones, who we signed in free agency, Taron Johnson, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Saran Neal. Let me check to make sure that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, we're also keeping Cam Lewis in this scenario. So Trey White to the PUP, and then the 6 corners that we're keeping on the roster for now, Taron Johnson, Sidney Jones, Dane Jackson, Saran Neal, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Cam Lewis. Then at safety, we're keeping 4 of those, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, DeMar Hamlin, and Jaquan Johnson. And then our specialists, we have 3 of those, Reed Ferguson, Tyler Bass, and new punter J.K. Scott. I don't know about you, but I really like how that came together. And obviously, this is all Galaxy Brain. It's all me just doing whatever I want. I don't really have anyone to negotiate with. I just did it. And so I thought this was really fun to close out the week. With free agency starting next week, things are going to move fast and furious. We've already seen a ton of stuff happen in the NFL. The Russell Wilson trade, the Carson Wentz trade. Aaron Rodgers is staying. There's been players cut. Bobby Wagner, Roger Saffold. Big deals handed out to Harold Landry and Mike Williams. So the offseason is here. It's going to be fun. I love roster construction. We're going to talk all about it here throughout the coming weeks here on Locked On Bills. Let me know what you think about this mock offseason that I put together. Leave me a comment here if you're watching on YouTube, or shoot me a tweet at the Joe Marino. I'd like to hear your feedback on what I was able to do. And if you would sign up for this right now, I think you should. I'm really proud of what I was able to do. This was really, really fun. Just like every episode's fun. I always love doing this podcast and talking Bills with you every single day. Next week, it's going to be crazy. A lot of moving pieces here. So we'll talk about it all as we build up to the draft and get through free agency. So make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, share the podcast. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to catching up with you again on Monday.